Welcome to Reagan and Friends, a podcast series hosted by the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute. Each month we will share some behind-the-scenes moments and stories of President Reagan with some of his more famous friends.
I find my thoughts turning to my own mother, Nelly Reagan. She was truly a remarkable woman, ever so strong in her determination, yet always tender, always giving of herself to others. She never found time in her life to complain. She was too busy living those values she sought to impart in my brother and myself. She was the greatest influence on my life.
In honor of Mother's Day, this month's Reagan and Friends podcast is featuring Ronald Reagan's mother, Nelly Reagan. Nelly was born Nellie Clyde Wilson in 1883 in Fulton, Illinois. She was the oldest of 7 children. She met Jack Reagan in a farm town along the Illinois prairie, and the two were married in November 1904. Jack and Nelly Reagan had 2 children, Nelle Reagan, often called Moon, and Ronald Reagan. From his mother, Ronald Reagan learned about faith, the value of prayer, and how to believe in your dreams and make them come true. Her belief in the good in everyone and her eternal optimism was passed on to her son. Nelly believed that God had a plan for everyone, and that seemingly random twists of fate are all part of God's perfect plan. She faithfully attended Sunday services at the Disciples of Christ Church, and as a strong believer in the power of prayer, she led prayer meetings and was in charge of midweek prayers when the pastor was out of town.
Now and then, I find guidance and direction in the worn brown Bible I use to take the oath of office. It's been the Reagan family Bible, and like many of yours, has its flyleaf filled with important events. Its margins are scrawled with insights, and its passages underlined for emphasis. My mother, Nellie, made all those marks in that book. She used it to instruct her 2 young sons, and I look to it still.
This Bible with all of its markings is on display at the Reagan Library. Ronald Reagan used it to take the oath of office for both terms as governor of California and both terms as president of the United States. In late 2019, the Reagan Foundation received a phone call from the office of Mike Pence. The former governor was hoping he could take his oath of office to become vice president of the United States on the Bible too. It was permitted, and the Bible was hand-carried to Washington, D.C., and then returned back to our display at the Reagan Library. Although Nelly Reagan spent much of her time in the church and helping her community, she also loved to act, and often acted in community center plays. One 1926 review of the play, The Ship of Faith, said, "Mrs. Reagan is one of Dixon's favorite readers and has appeared before many audiences, always greatly pleasing them." In 1937, Ronald Reagan, then a radio announcer, did a Hollywood screen test, getting signed by Warner Brothers. After saying goodbye to his family and friends, he packed up and moved to California, driving there in a Nash convertible he had recently purchased for $600. In 1938, Ronald Reagan bought his parents a new home in Hollywood, the first they had ever owned.
Nellie was filled with goodness and love. In the darkest days of their depression, when they themselves could barely scrape by, no one ever came to their door in need of a meal who Nellie sent away empty-handed. I'm proud of many things I've done in my life, including more than a few in the last 8 years, but nothing has ever given me as much satisfaction as when, after several years in California, I could bring my mother and father out here and give them a home, the first they had ever owned.
Sadly, Nelly Reagan passed away in 1962 at the age of 79, before having the opportunity of seeing her son in politics. But that didn't stop Ronald Reagan from speaking about her often. In 1984, President and Mrs. Reagan visited the Jean Jugan residence, a senior living provider in San Pedro, California. Our archive still contains President Reagan's speech cards from those remarks.
You know, Nancy and I, coming down here from Camp David on the helicopter, we couldn't help but be thinking about this particular day and what it was. I think in hindsight, perhaps I realize more about my mother than, and as so many of us did not at the time. Nellie was a little woman, auburn hair, and I realize now had a strength through some very trying times that held our family together. We were poor, but the government didn't come around and tell us we were, so we didn't know it. And probably we didn't know it because Nellie was always finding someone that was worse off than we were, that needed help. And she taught us about life, I think, by her deeds as well as her words. She had never gone beyond in education, beyond elementary school, but she had a different kind of education that I think has been imprinted, and a faith that I know now has been bestowed on me.
Also in our archives is a portrait drawing of a young Ronald Reagan with his mother Nellie, which he received in 1987. We also have a handwritten card that Nellie wrote to a friend. In the card, Nellie is thanking the friend for a birthday gift, and then notes that she was disappointed when her son didn't mention her birthday to her. But 2 days later, a delivery man showed up at her house with a chair, which was his gift to her. In the note she wrote, "It was a lovely surprise, just as Ronald's gift was."
My mother, Nellie, never had the chance to go beyond elementary school. All her life, she devoted herself to our family and held us together both emotionally and financially.
Thank you for watching.
Don't forget that when you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you'll be notified every time new videos and podcasts are added to our site, including our Reagan and Friends, Words to Live By, and Reagan Forum podcasts. And don't forget to follow @Ronald Reagan on Facebook and Twitter, as well as @Reagan Foundation on Instagram and YouTube.